Well, good morning, Grace. How you guys doing today? Craig, you okay over there? Yep, I get that. Hey, if this is your first Sunday here, welcome. I'm so glad that you're here. If I haven't met you, my name is Pastor Jason. For some reason, they give me the microphone every week, so we'll see how it goes. If you are third, fourth, fifth grade, or junior high, we would invite you to be dismissed back to your class. Your teachers are waiting for you. They are so excited. I always say this is one of my favorite parts of the service, but then the kids take it the wrong way, that I'm excited that they're leaving. That's not the case. I'm excited to see how many of them there are back there. So we need to be praying for those teachers because there is a gaggle of kids back there. If this is your first Sunday, just a quick word of why we do what we do. So we keep the younger kids in for the first song, because we value them watching their parents worship with other people. Plus, it allows their teachers to be a part of community and fellowship and worship on a Sunday morning. And then we keep the third, fourth, fifth grade, and junior high kids in with us as well for the entirety of worship, because we feel that it's important and valuable for them also to see you as their parents worshiping with other adults. Like dad being vulnerable and maybe like lifting your hands in praise. We think that it's valuable and important for them to be a part of communion and things like that we do in celebrations. And so that's why we do what we do. If you have your Bibles and you want to follow along, we're going to be in Genesis 22 again. This will be the last week of Genesis 22. We have been on this journey following the life of Abraham, this series called Follow the Abraham series. I keep losing track. I think this is week 28 or 29. We have one more week with Abraham and then we're done. We're going to finish the Abraham series at the end of September, and then the month of October, the entire month of October, to go along with our Grace 101 classes in the afternoon, we're going to be doing a Mission Vision series for the entire month of October, where we talk about the mission and vision that God has called Middleton Grace Bible Church to. It's updated mission and vision. We for the last 7 years, we were part of a larger church over in Nampa, and so we had a common mission and vision. But now that we've spun off on our own as a standalone church, God has been working in the hearts of the elders about what following Jesus for our church looks like. And so we are excited about what that's going to be. And so we would invite you to come back during the month of October to see about the mission and vision and see if you want to work alongside us to do it. Here's the reality. Let's be brutally honest with you. It's nothing spectacular. It's nothing brand new that you've never heard. And so as followers of Jesus, you should just be doing this every day in your life. So it should be a pretty easy marriage to go alongside, right? So let's do it. Okay. Genesis chapter 22. Let's just dive right in. We'll start reading in verse 1. After these things, God tested Abraham and said to him, Abraham. And he said, Here I am. And he said, Take your son, your only son Isaac, whom you love, and go to the land of Moriah and offer him there as a burnt offering on one of the mountains at which I shall tell you. Now remember, last week we talked about the difference between a temptation and a test. And admittedly, sometimes it's easy to get things confused. It's easy to get the difference between temptation and a test confused. Has anybody ever just messed anything up in your life? I see husbands point at wives, wives point at husbands. Many years ago, when Cooper was much shorter than he is now, we went on a trip. We were headed to Colorado. We had two little ones, or three at that time. Two little ones. We had Cooper and Savannah. We were headed to Colorado to do a family vacation with my side of the family. My dad got a timeshare. My brothers were coming up from Texas with their entire family, my three brothers, and Becky and I were bringing our kids down. And listen, like any smart, intelligent parents, we look at the drive between Idaho and Colorado, and we say it's too much to do in one day with 3 and 2-year-olds, something like that. It's just too much. Now, all of you folks that are 55 and older, I know you're looking at me and going, it's too much. You're weak. You're like 65 miles. You can drive 65 hours in one shot. Not this guy. You put me in a car on a sunny afternoon and I'm falling asleep before I get to Boise. And so we make reservations at we just make reservations at a town. I don't even remember what town it was, but it's kind of the halfway point. So we're going to get a hotel. It's going to be awesome. We'll get up early in the morning. We'll drive and we'll get there, I don't know, about noon or 1 o'clock. We'll check in. There's a swimming pool. We'll swim. We'll have fun. It'll be a blast. And we'll get up the next morning and we'll finish the drive to Colorado. Now, I did all the driving. I did most of the packing of the car. And I'm not going to claim that I packed the clothes for the kids, but I organized everything into our little car. I got the route that we were going to drive. I may have just used the apps the map apps on my phone to figure it out, but I knew where we were going. Give me credit. And my wife had one job for this trip. One job and one job only, and that was to reserve the hotel. Now, if you know my wife, you're like, well, we know she reserved the hotel. She's very responsible. She did reserve the hotel. But if you know my wife, she's also very directionally challenged. And let's be honest, like 4 Easters ago, to get to church from our house, all she has to do is go out and turn left. She turned right and ended up in Notice. Called me on Easter morning, 15 minutes before church, in a frantic because she was going to be late. I couldn't even help her. I just handed my phone to Mike Ball and said, get my wife to church. She reserved us a hotel, but instead of reserving us a hotel in the city in Wyoming, she reserved us a hotel for the same city in the great state of Nebraska. Now, a couple of things happened that day. We got away later than we thought we were going to get away. So instead of rolling in like at noon or 1 o'clock in the afternoon, it's 8 or 9 o'clock in the evening. It's a strange town. We're driving around. At this point, my directions are garbage because she's in the wrong town, wrong state. I'm lost. We pull into this hotel. It's very, very sketchy. Admittedly, it's in a bad part of town. We go in. They don't have any rooms available. I've got Coop and Vanna crying in the back, Becky crying in the right-hand seat, I'm crying in the driver's seat. And we joke about it, but it's easy to get it confused, right? You're excited about vacation, you make the reservation, you type it in. For whatever reason, the internet will just will spit something out for you, and you see the town, and the town is big and bold, and the state abbreviation is like microscopic, and you can barely even see it, and you click book, and it's easy to get things mixed up. It's easy to get things confused. It's easy to find yourself wondering what life is all about and how am I going to navigate these tests or trials that I find myself in life. And what's really easy to get confused is who's in charge of your life and who is teaching you and who is the student. And in case you're unsure, that you could write this down in your sermon guide. They're going to put it up on the screen. But God is the teacher and you are the student. God's job is to teach you and I, and our job is to learn from him. We have nothing that we can teach God. I know every single person in here just had that thought, oh, but wait, you have nothing that you can offer God that he does not already know. Now, that doesn't diminish you in his standing. Just because he can't learn anything from you doesn't mean that you're not valuable or worthy. In fact, we just celebrated the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus Christ, which is a living, breathing example of the value that God places in your life. He valued relationship with you so much, he sent his son to die on a cross for you and I. But the reality is in this life, we have nothing that we can offer God that he needs to know from us to learn. The last couple of weeks, we've been looking at lists, right? We've had a couple of different lists. Like 3 weeks ago, we looked at this idea of how to solve problems biblically. Last week, we looked at the stages of sin in a person's life and how it starts with desire and it ends with death. And today, we're going to look at another list, admittedly, on how to thrive and survive during a trial that we may find ourselves in life. Not a temptation, but a trial or a test that God may put us through so that he can produce in us something that he needs us to have. And so it's almost like, and God's teaching us through this, teaching us through the life of Abraham. It's almost like, yesterday I had the privilege and honor of leading a celebration of life service for Doyle Ankenman, who attended this church. His wife, Linda, still does. She's not here today. She's spending the day with her family. And the family asked for me to share a story. I was one of the last people that actually got to talk to Doyle while he was still coherent, was able to express how he was feeling and things. And they asked me to share kind of that last piece of advice that he gave me, not even a family member, just some guy that's been in his life for a couple of years. And he gave me this amazing piece of wisdom. And really what it was this last piece of advice on his deathbed that he was passing on to the next generation. And that's what really Abraham is doing for us today as we read Genesis chapter 22. Think of this, it's Abraham is lying on his deathbed. This is his last piece of advice. He goes, if you're going to learn anything from following my life this year, learn this. Let me heap upon you this idea of what it means to be a follower of Jesus. And the first piece of advice that Abraham has for you and I is that we focus on the promises, not the expectations. We focus on the promises of God, not our own expectations. Continue to read with me. We're going to start in verse 3. So Abraham arose early in the morning. He saddled his donkey, and he took 2 of his young men with him and his son Isaac, and he cut the wood for the burnt offering, and he arose and went to the place of which God had told him. And then on the 3rd day, Abraham lifted up his eyes, and he saw the place from afar. Can you guys just imagine marching 3 days with 2 servants and your son, some wood and the fire, knowing that at the end of this march, you're going to have to offer your son as that sacrifice to God, your only son, the one that you spent 25 years waiting for, 3 long days. And while we're not going to talk about it today, you should notice some correlation for what it looked like for Jesus to be on the cross. 3 days in a tomb, 3 days marching to the mountain. So Abraham lifted up his eyes, and he saw the place from afar. Then Abraham said to his young men, stay here with the donkey, and I and the boy will go over there and worship and come to you again. Now, admittedly, right, this would have been the time to question. 3 days, you get to the foot of the mountain, you've got the wood, you've got your son, you've got your servants, you've got everything that you need. You've prepared. You didn't question, you just prepared, and you've gone and you've gone to the place that God showed you. This would be the moment to question, wouldn't it? Or is it just, am I the only one that would question? I'd be like, I'd be like, okay, now, hey, you guys stay here. I'm going to go pray real quick, and I'll be back. And I would go find a place, and I would get on my knees, and I would go, God, are you sure this is what you want me to do? Isaac, this is the son, man. This is the one that you prophesied. This is the one that you told Sarah you were going to come back in a year and she was going to have a child, and she laughed and you heard. You remember that, right? This is the long-awaited promise, the long-awaited son, the one. Remember, God, you said that you were going to bless the world through Isaac. But if I kill him today, if I give him as a sacrifice, how are you going to bless the world through him? This would have been the time that you asked those questions. But Abraham doesn't. He focuses on God's promise instead of his expectation. He focuses on the promise that God said, I'm going to bless the world through Isaac. Not through Ishmael, through Isaac. Isaac is going to be the one. He focuses on the promise of God that he was going to be the father of many nations. He focuses on that promise where God says, if you could count the grains of sand on the beach or the stars in the skies, that's how many descendants you're going to have. He focuses on that promise instead of his expectation of how it should work out. Anybody ever struggle with that? The idea of how you think a problem should work out versus how God solves it for you? Can I get an amen? All right, you guys are awake. I heard you mutter amen. This would have been the time to question. But he doesn't. Instead, he focuses on God's promise instead of his expectation. And get this, the second thing that we learn from him is he depends on God's provision. He depends on God's provision. That's the second thing in your sermon guide. They're going to put that up on the screen for you so you can write that down. But let's read. Let's continue to read in verse 6. And Abraham took the wood of the burnt offering and he laid it on his son Isaac. And he took in his hand the fire and the knife. And so both of them went together. And Isaac said to his father, Abraham, my father. And he said, here I am, my son. And he said, behold, the fire and the wood, but where is the lamb for the burnt offering? Pause, leave the verses up there. Isaac starts to question. Hey, Dad, you're carrying a knife and fire, and I'm carrying wood. What's going on here? That's what's happening. The innocent son walking up a mountain, carrying the wood that he's going to be laid on. Sound familiar? Let's continue to read. Abraham said, God will provide for himself the lamb of the burnt offering, my son. So they went, both of them together. And when they came to the place of which God had told him, Abraham built the altar there and laid the wood in order and bound Isaac his son and laid him on the altar on top of the wood. Pause. Isaac's 18, 22. Abraham's 100 and something. Listen, y'all, I don't know about you, but if my 100 and something year old dad starts tying me up and putting me on some logs with some fire, there's going to be a revolt. But Isaac trusts what he knows. He trusts his dad. Dad, if you tell me, I'm going to do it. Let's keep reading. Bound Isaac his son and laid him on the altar on top of the wood. Then Abraham reached out his hand and he took the knife to slaughter his son. Verse 11, but the angel of the Lord called to him from heaven and said, Abraham, Abraham. And he said, here I am. He said, do not lay your hand on the boy or do anything to him. For now I know that you fear God, seeing you have not withheld your son, your only son from me. And Abraham lifted up his eyes and he looked, and behold, behind him was a ram caught in the thicket by his horns. And Abraham went and took the ram and offered him up as a burnt offering instead of his son. So Abraham called the name of that place, the Lord will provide. As it is said to this day, on the mount of the Lord it shall be provided. We as humans suffer from a condition called small-minded gratitude. It's not clinically defined, but just go with me at the definition and you'll understand what I'm talking about. No sooner do we recognize God for having done something extraordinary in our lives, then we start harboring second thoughts and focus on the details of what could have been better about God's provision. Anybody suffer from that? I know I do. I'm like, I get through a thing, I pray and I ask God for something and he answers. And then after the answer comes and it's miraculous in my life, whatever it may be, I start to go, well, it could have been just a little bit better. Like, man, if it was me, I would have done it this way. We have to go back to like kind of the point for today, right? Like, God's the teacher, I'm the student. I don't get to choose how God solves my problems. I don't get to choose how God moves me through something. Well, maybe you could have done it this way different. Did I have to spend like 3 years in what felt like a desert? And all the while, God is saying, sweet loved one, you have no idea what's coming. well, God all the while is saying, sweet one, you have no idea what I have planned for you and the glory that is going to come from what you went through. I look back at seasons in our life that Becky and I went through, and I think to myself, I remember clearly thinking in those seasons in my mind and in my spirit, crying out to God, what are you doing? This makes absolutely no sense. In fact, there were seasons where it not only did it not make sense in my, like, to the way that I would have done it, it felt like it didn't make sense, like, biblically. It's like I said, I would read and I would be like, why would you do this to me, God? You promised to never leave me or forsake me, but it really feels like I'm being forsaken right now. And God all the while is just sitting there patiently waiting, going, trust me, I've got this. Be like Isaac, trust the Father. Trust what you know is true. So we trust, we depend on God's provision. Hebrews writes this out. It says this, by faith, Abraham, when God tested him, offered Isaac as a sacrifice. He who had embraced the promises was about to sacrifice his one and only son. And even though God had said to him, it is through Isaac that your offspring will be reckoned, Abraham, listen, this is the important part. Abraham reasoned that God could even raise the dead. So in a manner of speaking, he did receive Isaac back from death. Isaac walked up that mountain a dead man. In Abraham's mind, he was ready to do what God asked him to do. Even though it didn't make sense, God said, do this thing. Abraham had resolved himself to do it because he was applying the one of the last lessons that he has for us. He was seeking to glorify Christ in all that he did. Even when it didn't make sense, God said, do it. Because he was seeking to glorify Christ. Even when you have a season of what feels like spiritual silence from God, and you know that you need to pray and read your scripture, but you pray and it feels like your prayers only get as high as your bedroom ceiling, and then they come crashing back down, and you're like, God, are you even listening to me in this moment? We continue to do it because we continue to seek to glorify Christ. When that fellow brother or sister call and they ask something of you that is inconvenient, it's messy for you to get involved, we still do it because that's what God has called us to do. He's called us to be in relationship. He's called us to be in community, not only with Him, but with one another. I mean, we're going to spend eternity with each other. We might as well get to learn to like each other, right? I like all of you. We seek to glorify Christ in all that we did. I got a great video this week. I'm part of a Bible study. We have one guy that kind of leads it. It's on text message. Every morning we get a breakdown of a chapter of the Bible that this guy goes through, and he thumbs it all out. I don't even know how long it takes him to type it out. And there are like no grammatical mistakes in it at all or anything, y'all. Every word is spelled like it's not how I text message, but it's really powerful. And this week, and sometimes guys in the Bible study, they'll respond back with a thought or an idea, or they'll like his comment, or they'll emphasize, or they'll love his comment. And this week we got one of the guys responded to his comment with the video. And this is a guy who I don't know super well, but I know people really well that know him well, and he's starting his walk with Jesus, and he's starting to follow what it means. He's starting to learn what it means to be a follower of Jesus, and he sends this video, and he's throwing some stuff away, and I'm like, what is? I didn't know what it was, and I'm looking at it, and my old man eyes, like I can't see it, so I take my contacts out, and I put my glasses on, and I get my flashlight out, and I'm like trying to get really close to see what it is. And what he was doing, he was throwing his vape pens away. Now, he didn't say anything like in the text message. He just sent the video. He didn't type anything out. But what he was saying in that moment, in that action is, you know what? God, you're enough for me. I don't need this other stuff. You're enough for me. And you know what I love? It was his way. It was how he was glorifying Christ in that moment in his life. And you know what I absolutely loved? That video came in, and it wasn't like 10 seconds later. Almost every guy in that video chat on that text was like, dude, way to go. I'm so proud of you. I'm here for you. I'm praying for you. If you need help, reach out to me. We've got your back. If you struggle, your temptation strikes, you get on this text message and you call us, and we're praying for you. That's what glorifying Christ looks like. It's not just raising your hands on a Sunday morning. Admittedly, that's glorifying Christ. It's being in relationship with people. It's being in community and walking alongside one another. It's this powerful, beautiful moment. When you find yourself in a hotel in the wrong city, but thank the Lord Jesus that they have Nickelodeon and you can put something on to distract your kids. That nothing came good out of that hotel, the hotel that we finally found. Nothing came good out of it but two things. The television show called Handy Manny. I don't know if you've ever seen it. Cooper's like fist bumping over there. We love Handy Manny. And one of the greatest one-liners from my daughter that's ever been uttered from her mouth, that sweet girl right there, we're sitting there in the hotel room. And she goes, I don't like this home. Can we go back to our other home? And we were like, no, you can't. Because we knew it was coming at the end of the next day. How many of us find ourselves sitting in the middle of a trial or tribulation when God's trying to teach us something, and we say to ourselves, I don't like this home. Can I go back to the other one? And God's saying, oh, but loved one, you have no idea what's coming at the end of the tomorrow when you just endure, when it's just dark, but for a night, you have no idea what's coming. And the reason why is the very last lesson that we have from Abraham, this last chapter, and it's this, that God has something for you. Wherever you're at today in your faith walk, in your faith journey, whether you're like, this is, you woke up one morning and mom and dad said, hey, get dressed up, and you thought you were going out to eat, and you ended up at church on a Sunday morning. Or you were just driving by and you saw the flags and you're like, oh, what's going on there? There's a lot of people. Maybe there's something happening. And you walked in and it was church service. Or you've been a believer for 50, 60, 70 years. If you're not dead, God's not done. He has something for you. Beyond where you're at right now, God is calling you to something deeper. God is calling you to something stronger. God is calling you to something greater than what you could have ever imagined, hoped, or dreamed. The worship team is going to come up, and they're going to lead us in our last song for the day. And listen, here's the thing. The thing that God has for you, He can give to you because He's good. He's a good God, and He's a good Father to each and every one of us.